Just uploaded a new video about my trip to Venice back in May. After I uploaded it, I just felt very inspired to give you a little bit of the backstory of how my trip happened, why I went there, some of my impressions from my trip that didn't make it in the video. Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Lily, travel journalist, passionate about showing you how to make your travels more meaningful, exciting for you, and beneficial for the places and the people that you visit. So I uploaded my Venice video with tips on how to see it beyond the crowds, but I really wanted to kind of take a step back and tell you how I even ended up there. As a journalist, there's always a backstory to what we do. At least there is for me, as long as I've been doing this. Here's the thing. I actually didn't plan on going to Venice directly. I've always wanted to go there because I've always reported on it and the over-tourism issues in the last couple of years. But initially, my trip was about going to Sicily. I chose Sicily because there was going to be a women's retreat that was for writers and creatives, and I knew one of the folks who was organizing the retreat, so I knew it would be really valuable. And I'd never been to Sicily. I was always curious about Sicily. The retreat was going to be in a really remote area, like a rural area of Sicily that I'd never heard of. And then I was like, well, if I'm going to go all the way there, if I'm going to fly all the way to Sicily from Washington, D.C., then I should, add a few days and experience another part of Sicily while I'm there. I did a ton of research online, as I always do before I travel, and I stumbled on a nearby really cute historical town called Ortigia and Siracusa, and so I decided I was going to add a few days and do that. That's actually what my next video is going to be about. So before my trip, I knew that it was my chance to visit Venice. It's a huge part of my work is to track the travel trends and see what's happening in destinations. And it's also part of sustainability, the over-tourism, the overcrowding, how are these destinations managing things? During the pandemic, I wrote a lot about these issues that impact tourism. When tourism completely disappeared, you remember how many places were impacted. Didn't have any revenue, didn't have any cruises, etc. For some, no cruise ships was a great thing, because of the harm that a lot of the mass cruises have brought to destinations like Venice, like Barcelona, like Juneau, Alaska. And so while I was reporting during that period on these things, I was writing an article about the impact of having no cruises on some of these places. And while I was doing that, I met a couple of sources that have become actually some of my, really trusted sources and contacts, and I would even say, work friends while I was doing the reporting. So, when we report, we have to reach out to reliable sources. We need to get their intakes, see what's happening, talk to different, take in different types of perspectives to balance it out. Anyway, so I stumbled on this lady in Juneau, Alaska, and then she told me about this collective of cruise ship advocates, or I would say anti-cruise ship advocates, who, these are people who've been residents in the places that they live in for many, many years. They've seen it transform because of the type of mass tourism that's coming into their cities. And it's changed the character of the place they live. It's actually quite sad. I don't think many people actually sit down and think about this, but it definitely made me think more. Would I want my city and the place I live to turn into a circus? No, there's no need to have 5,000 people flowing into the downtown of anywhere at any one time. It's just mind-boggling. Anyway, so they would tell me how things have changed, how it's not just about the crowd. It's also some of the activities they take part in. For example, if you do helicopter tours, I don't know if you ever thought of this, but you're actually disturbing residents. If it's a tour that's very, very popular that everybody does, imagine having a helicopter flying over your head every 20 minutes where you live. It's like a nightmare. Anyway, so I learned about all these different things while talking to people, including this lady in Alaska. I talked to a lady in Venice. Now, she's become kind of like very well known for her advocacy. She's an environmental scientist. Her name is Jane Damosto. And so I had the pleasure of connecting with Jane online while I was reporting. So I've talked to her as a source. I think maybe twice we've had emails going back and forth. And so when I finally had the chance to go to Italy 3 years later, right? 3 or 4, wow, it's been 4 years since the pandemic. Anyway, so I had the chance to go to Italy. I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to finally see Venice in person, since I've written about the issues there, and to get to meet Jane. I emailed her saying, it's a possibility I'll be in Italy. If I do make it to Venice, we should meet, and I hope you can make it. So she told me that her son was, undergoing surgery around those dates, but that if not, she was going to find out, and if not, definitely we should meet. Please come. She was like so nice. That's pretty much how it came together. About I would say very last minute, like maybe 2 weeks before, I confirmed that she was going to be in town in Venice. She's lived there for like more than 30 years. It was my chance to really like hear about the issues firsthand, to walk around with her in Venice, see the places where she shops, and also hear about some of the latest efforts that she has going. She has an NGO, We Are Here Venice, which I mentioned in my Venice vlog, by the way. There's a link in the comments if you haven't watched it yet. Thanks to her, I experienced some very unique corners of Venice. She invited me over to have, lunch with her family. I mean, this is incredible. Her husband's family owns one of the oldest properties in Venice. It was a palace, actually, Palazzo da Mosto, which is also referred in my video about Venice. During our day together, after lunch, we also went to meet with a connect of hers, a contact who is familiar with the cruise ship industry. I got to hear about that. The truth is that, there are fewer cruises coming now, docking in Venice, because, they were banned from docking in the historical center of town, which I can't even imagine how horrible that must have been, just overshadowing all that beauty and then pouring in thousands and thousands of people. I don't know if you take cruises, that's something to think about. So they can't dock in the historical city anymore. They have to dock at Marghera, which is a port that's about across the lagoon. There's still an impact on the lagoon, but at least it's not in the face of residents. So as a result, some of the cruise ships have rerouted. They don't go to Venice as much, and they're going now to Syracuse, which ironically I was there just before. And so I didn't know this until I was in Syracuse and Ortigia in Sicily, and I saw on the second day a cruise ship docked. Anyway, more on that later. This is why, as journalists, we get really an inside look at places, an inside look at the travel industry, and how our behavior really has an impact on places, right? I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but like there's so many more people traveling now of all races. It's become so diverse, which is a great thing. There's a lot of Indian travelers now. Middle class families now have a higher, income, and they're traveling. We're seeing a lot more African American travelers out there, record amounts, and that's fantastic. But the industry hasn't done a very good job of telling people like, okay, what you choose to do in places really matters, and it impacts real people like Jane that I met in Venice, and showing me her home, walking me around some of the shortcuts that she takes, but also some of the frustrations as she's trying to navigate these huge crowds in St. Mark's Square. And it really makes you think, is it fair? I mean, travel should be democratized. I don't believe in telling people not to go places. I think you should go. I think that if all of us traveled more, we would have a better understanding of each other. I do think that with the privilege that comes with traveling, there's a responsibility. And so as a journalist, I get to meet all these kinds of people, and that's why it fuels my passion, because for me, it's not just a random concept, right? It's like people I know, people I got to know over the course of my career, people who have families, people I care about. And so I think of that every time I visit places of like, okay, what activities am I going to take part in, right? So I went to the museum that she told me about, actually. I wouldn't have known about it otherwise, honestly. And it was just as great of an experience. There were fewer people, much fewer. There was maybe like a group of like 6 students with the professor. Meanwhile, the next day when I went to the Doge Palace, which has cruise visitors, of course. I mean, you see these tour guides with huge flags going, follow me, because there's so many of them that they would get lost otherwise. And it was a horrific experience. I'm sorry, but go when there's no cruise ships in town in Venice, because you will not enjoy it otherwise. I felt absolutely oppressed. And the lovely part of that visit was that I found a Marco Polo. There was a Marco Polo exhibit and the story of Marco Polo, which was really fascinating. I wanted to give you the backstory because there's always a backstory when you're a journalist. So I'm going to try and do this more with other videos and vlogs that I'm going to do about places I visit. Let me know if you're interested in that. I'm happy to do one also for Zambia and first impressions. But lastly, I want to say Venice is absolutely worth seeing. It is absolutely mind-blowing. I've heard people describe it in really negative ways, and I disagree. I think that it's not a theme park. It's a beautiful architectural marvel. There are people who live there still. There's universities there. Did you know that? And the further you get away from St. Mark's Square, the better it gets. It's absolutely worth seeing what's happening in Venice, and it's absolutely worth knowing, why it's important to think about your choices when you're traveling. But anyway, that's what I do. If you care, you care. If you don't, c'est la vie. But this channel is for the people who care. All right. Well, thanks for listening. I hope that was interesting. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.